You're listening to the School of Hard Knock Knocks podcast with me, Maury Morgan.
Ladies and gentlemen, your next comedian.
Shouldn't drink on an empty head, you know that, don't you?
That is the shittiest heckle I have ever heard in my life.
Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
What's a bucket list?
You have dangerously underprepared yourself for the shit that is about to get real.
It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. Comedy's just as arduous. Coincidentally, Steve Hughes has done both. Starting out as a drummer for extreme metal band Slaughterlord in Sydney, Hughes became obsessed with faster and faster metal before getting interested in comedy and performing stand-up between band tours. Eventually, being front of stage rather than at the rear dominated his life, and the Steve Hughes Comedian that we know today was born. In this School of Hard Knock Knocks podcast episode, we go deep and talk about death metal, political comedy, commercial and feminist agendas, political correctness and social justice warriors. We also talk about Steve's own battle with depression and mental health, as well as drug use, both legal and prescribed. If you're just starting out in your comedy career, this is a cautionary tale. Comedy's not all TV specials and bowls of blue-only M&Ms in the green room. This is comedy in the raw. And with that warning, here he is, Steve Hughes. Good morning, Steve. How are you?
I am very well. Thank you very much. How are you?
Well, I'm very good. You sound like you've got a bit of a cold, though.
Yeah, shouldn't smoke a cigarette when I wake up, which I never used to do, but for some reason now I've given up every other vice in the universe. I've still got this one to kick.
There you go. Oh, well, thank you very much for your time on this morning. And we are both in Melbourne, which is nice to know that you're back home, I guess. Is that where you're originally from, Melbourne?
I grew up in Sydney.
You grew up in Sydney? Okay. Well, welcome to Melbourne.
Yeah, I just came here, a friend of mine, about a year, so nearly a year ago. It's a mate of mine. I was going to, I've been going through some serious shit the last 3 years, and I just ended up moving down here for a while with a mate of mine and stayed, so...
We might talk about that serious shit in this call. We'll see how it goes. Being a stand-up comedian, not much of your life is private. I guess it becomes stage material. Well, before we get into the most recent shit, I want to go way back, if you don't mind. I want to go back before you started comedy. Now, you know, you're the kind of guy that has a Wikipedia page. There's fan pages out there for you. So anyone who knows you and is a fan already knows this, but for some of you who only know you as the comedian, they may not know that you were in an extreme metal band. Specifically, you were the drummer.
Yes, indeed I was.
And it was and just to emphasise how extreme, this band eventually got called Slaughterlord. Is that right?
Yeah, Slaughterlord. That's what the band was called, indeed. Yeah.
Can I ask? Well, firstly, tell me a little bit about that band. Early days, was that because it started in Australia, I believe?
Yeah, it started in Australia. Well, it's basically the first really extreme thrash death metal band in Australia.
Right,
we put it together by the early 80s, and there was us and Mortal Sin, who I also ended up playing in the late 80s, early 90s, but we were the two first thrash bands. Yeah. So Slaughterlord was a lot more extreme than Mortal Sin.
When you say more extreme, are you talking about like ripping their heads off chickens, or
just extreme in the sense of speed and brutality of the music? When I was young, I got into heavy metal through Iron Maiden in the early 80s, and then I was always looking for something heavier. What's heavier? You know, I was into metal. I was obsessed by it, so I was into sort of, you know, everything around then. You're into Priest and Scorpions and Dio and Sabbath and Maiden and... But I always wanted something heavier, so there's got to be something heavier. And then, you know, there was also the time of bands like, you know, you had your hair bands. I loved Motley Crue when they first came out because they were amazing when they first came out and all this. And but that was also hair metal time, so you had, you know, Rat and Icon and TNT and all these bands from the States and sort of over Europe and the hair metal bands. But I never really liked it. I never really liked that stuff. I was just, this doesn't really do anything for me. And then once sort of I started to get into the underground a lot, so I'd get a lot of the early Metal Massacre records, these compilation albums from the United States, US Metal and Metal Massacre, which was Brian Slagle, who ended up signing Metallica first, his kind of early compilation albums. And I did a lot of sort of pen pal stuff through this early magazine called Metal Forces from the United Kingdom, which spawned out of Kerrang, really, because Kerrang was going so mainstream, and this guy ended up starting Metal Forces. You know, a section called Pen Bangers, so I used to write in there and write to people overseas and collect as much music as I could. And then, once Metallica's album Kill 'Em All came out, that shifted the world. And so I was obsessed with thrash metal, death metal, black metal, as it spawned into I was just possessed by it. I was like, finally, this is what I want to play. So I put together a band, and I'd already started to put together a band, and then we just went thrash. And over the years, culled members, got new members, ended up writing as fast as we could and as heavy as we could, and then it just sort of stemmed from there. We discovered Mortal Sin. We're the only other band around, but they were still a little behind us. They were doing Twisted Sister covers, and we were doing Slayer covers.
So question about your drumming, because the two things I know about that sort of extreme heavy metal is I have no idea what the singer's saying, and the drummer is doing around, 200, 250 beats a minute? I don't know, maybe more. What's your record?
I have no idea what the record is, but I eventually played in a very supreme black metal band in the early 90s, or in the late 90s, called Nazul, which is extremely blast beat orientated. What became blast beats was just that hyper speed of drumming, which, strangely enough, which no one would ever believe, I kind of invented without knowing it. Not that there wasn't other people in the world sort of coming up with the same idea at the time, but we used to listen to Slayer and Exodus on 45 when we had vinyl, so it was super fast and super tight. Mm-hmm. And we came up with this idea to just go, let's see if we can play it just as extremely fast as we can, and which eventually became like blast beats, which they use in death and black metal. And there was a few bands, and then that kind of bands from Canada called Slaughter, they were kind of doing that stuff early on, and Napalm Death, and eventually Morbid Angel and stuff like this. But we just tried to play as extreme as we could, as absolutely extreme. So we only made one demo and put it out, but it became quite cult. And two of the songs got covered by bands overseas. At the Gates did a cover of one of our songs on their Slaughter of the Soul album. And another band called Heirs Kingdom from the States, they did another cover. We only put 3 songs out. Yeah. But we do have a CD out now, which is of all sort of post demos and rehearsal demos, which was put out by Invictus Records out of Ireland when I lived with them. When I lived in Ireland for a while, I lived with the guys from Primordial, and who are coming here this weekend, actually, for the first Australian tour. And
right, there you go. Your neighbours must have hated you. It's not like you're playing blues and jazz.
Yeah, they hated us, but, that's the deal. Plus, it was the 80s. You're allowed to have fun then.
A lot of things weren't banned at that point. Well, it was 94, and you jumped into comedy. So where were you in musically, and what made you go, at the back doing whatever it is, 250 beats or whatever, 500 beats a minute, I'm going to get up in front of the audience and I'm going to let people understand what I say, versus obviously the music that you were playing at the time?
But during this time in the sort of 90s, when I was in this other band and stuff, we'd have time off where we'd lose members and that, so I started to get interested in comedy. We were always interested in comedy, but I thought this is quite cool, so I did some drama courses, improvisational courses, and thought, well, let's just start some comedy, see what that's like. So we started. I used to do comedy gigs in between band tours and stuff. Then just started to get more and more into it. I realised I was getting older, and I was now in a hyper extreme black metal band, which is not going to get you very far in a country like this. And so I'd done comedy here for about 3 years during that time, and then I suddenly went, I've got a British passport. I've got to get out of here because there's no work, and Australia's a difficult country to have an artistic career in, because there's just tyranny of distance from the rest of the world. There's no population compared to there's 24 million people in a continent that's half the size of the planet.
Yeah,
and also culturally, it just doesn't seem to respect art at all. Doesn't care about it. Just cares about money and rugby league. So
yeah, well, I hope you're not on the tourism board. Yeah, that's not going to sell. So did you decide at one point, was there a moment where you've got a microphone and someone's gone, mate, you're hilarious, you should do this as a full-time job? Or what was the moment?
No, I was just kind of funny as I grew up. I was always kind of, gregarious, to use a word, and just sort of funny amongst my friends. Quite a shy person, really, socially, but amongst my friends, it was great. I had a great time. I was always funny and loved comedy and loved laughing. So I just kind of thought, we used to watch, in the 80s, we used to watch a lot of Billy Connolly and Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy and Steve Martin, and listen to Andrew Dice Clay, and which was great fun for all you PC people out there who haven't heard Andrew Dice Clay. Go and listen to it and get triggered.
Well, I think Bill Hicks and George Carlin would also be. Would that be fair to say? Some of your influences as well. Well, certainly your political influences.
Well, it's funny. They didn't influence me in the way I wanted to do comedy, but they showed me. Because I think I was influenced politically more by sort of, because I hung around a lot of punk guys, so I got introduced to like Jello Biafra and Dead Kennedys and Henry Rollins when they first started doing spoken word albums in the 80s when they released those spoken word albums. I thought, this is really interesting. These punk guys just make albums where they get up and sort of do poetry and talk about their political views and their societal views. And I thought, this is cool, you know. And I don't know, instinctively my brain always thought you had to say something in music. I like artists that say something, be it, you know, personal expression or political or social expression. I kind of like that. I like real artists. I can't deal with the mainstream. I just don't know what people do in the mainstream. I don't fathom how. I've never gotten the mainstream. I just don't get them. I mean, some good bands get in the mainstream, like U2 and Pink Floyd and, you know, Peter Gabriel. They're mainstream to a degree, but the ultimate, because they're very popular, but the mainstream, to this day, I just don't know why anyone would go along and watch Nicki Minaj and think that there's anything of real heart coming out of this performance. I just don't know how they just astound me. They just astound me.
Yeah, right.
To answer the question, which I didn't answer before about Bill Hicks and Carlin, I sort of saw Bill Hicks in the mid-90s, so that was just like finally I saw a comedian who was, you know, funny as hell, but also just full on in his opinions. And George Carlin, who I was never particularly into, so I've never found George Carlin stunningly funny. But as I started to listen to him more and more later on, I didn't really listen to him when I was young, getting influenced. I'd always heard of him, and so when I saw Bill Hicks, I was like, yeah, this is this is brilliant, you know. But to me, like, you know, Richard Pryor and that was always the same too, because, you know, or even Billy Connolly, even if it's not always political, but it's coming from their heart, you know, it's coming from their. They express a part of who they are. They're not just doing jokes, and you don't really know who they are at the end of it. You know, that's what I like in a comedian, and I like comedians who are just ridiculous.
Interestingly, what you're saying, I'm having a brain fart here. You know, in the old days, it was Carlin, it was Hicks, and Pryor, as you say, all Americans, all being quite critical. Today, it's John Oliver. It's Jim Jeffries and Trevor Noah, I should add. You know, what's happened to the American voice in criticism?
Well, you've still got Bill Burr. He's rocking around. Yeah, right. Doing a great job. Bill Burr's my favourite comedian these days. And but John Oliver and now Jim, well, they're also involved in. Well, I have to wonder sometimes. Once you get involved in commercial TV, you refine to it.
You think they've got corporate agendas?
Well, they have to.
So Jim Jeffries? On the record
well, no, I haven't spoken to Jim for a while.
Yeah.
I love Jim. He's one of my favourite comedians, him and Bill Burr.
Well, let's go there, if that's okay, because you lived with Jim in Manchester, is that right?
Yeah. I think he's one of the greatest comedians ever. And which is funny because Australia won't recognise him, but we could go into that, my theory on that if you want. But
yeah, go ahead. Why is it? Tell us.
Well, I find it very interesting that Jim Jeffries, who's now the most popular and the most successful stand-up comedian ever to come out of this country, ever in the history of the country.
Yeah, right.
And this country gives him no credence, doesn't stand up for him, hates him, gives him bad reviews.
Right. Well, he hasn't done this podcast, so maybe we can fix that.
You know, why don't they give Jim some respect, some credence?
Yeah.
Why? Well, because they think he's a misogynist, because he did a joke that goes against their feminist agenda. Yeah, grow up, Australia. Grow up. I've done comedy in 35 countries. I've lived in Europe, you know. These people understand that human beings are complex creatures that have light and dark sides. This country doesn't think anything should be dark. There's nothing dark about this country. You know what I mean? That's why everyone on the radio speaks like this. Everyone's got to be upbeat all the time, don't they? And they're going to have an interesting discussion today about how you like your banana bread. Do you like it toasted or not toasted? That's right. It's controversy down here at Triple M today, or wherever they come from. And they all talk like this. They interviewed me once when I was doing my last show, which I wrote, which was about depression and stuff. And they go, so what's your show about? I went, it's about having breakdowns, depression, suicide. And then they didn't know how to respond because they can't break out of his character. So they can't ask a serious question about something because they've got to keep everything upbeat and like this. Yeah, that's what's going on in Australia today, isn't it? Fantastic. And you just get, can we ever just God, it's boring.
We've sidetracked slightly. For those of you listening to this podcast thinking that this is a comedy podcast, well, you're completely wrong with Steve here. We're getting into sociology and anthropology here. Let's bring it back to comedy slightly. Now I don't know, I can't tell how tall you are, but you look like quite a
6'3".
6'3", yeah, you're 6'3", you're wiry, and you look tough. I mean, I don't know, the ears behind in the drums.
I'm not tough.
But you look tough. I'm just saying what you look. And I know that Jim Jeffries got punched in the face on stage. I think it was in Manchester. Did you ever have any similar experiences with because you're quite biting in your comedy?
No, I've never been punched. I've had the odd heckler and that, but on my last tours of the UK a few years ago, I was with my support act, Sally O'Sullivan, who lives over there. He's from New Zealand, and we often would wait for reviews or wait for some scathing thing on Facebook and I was like, we didn't seem to be getting anything. No one seems to be getting upset, which was quite cool, really. I'm not out to upset anyone, but I just don't know. I just don't seem to. There'll be people who don't agree with me or like my performance or like me. This just comes.
Well, someone's got to disagree with you because you covered just about every topic: religion, war, drugs, capitalism, liberalism.
Well, here's the funny thing:
feminism.
is I've been It's funny. I've never put myself in a political dialectic, if that's the word. I never framed myself being either left or right. I was just never really interested in politics. I was just interested in metal and that when I grew up. I didn't really care, But I think most sort of artist, creative types tend to just drift to being more liberal and lefty in their ideals.
Yep.
And many of their ideals are correct. There's suffering. No one wants suffering. No one wants oppression. No one wants people being taken advantage of and so forth. And war sucks and all this. But as I've gotten older, and now these PC people are out of control. I'm sorry, and I'm not right wing by any stretch of the imagination, but they've flipped me. They've flipped me because they're to me they've gone. They're now mentally ill, and conservatives have become the new radicals. They've become the new radicals.
Yeah, right. Have they hijacked on a political level? Have those PC people that you're describing? Do you think they've hijacked the left? Because I don't think the left was always like that. They were always critical, scathing, and now they're not allowed to. Yeah,
well, see, because I really don't understand the complexities or even the sort of psychology of I'm no academic. I don't know this. I'm just a fucking guy that likes metal and good comedy. But they've definitely, I think they must have hijacked it because they could never have been like this. I think it's been a slow hijack over the sort of 3 or 4 decades, I guess.
Yeah, right.
And what I've been studying now is they started to move into the realms of education and universities and start to put their agendas there and start to take over ideas. But now I think they've just become, and I think it's all orchestrated. I'm under no doubt that this is orchestrated. It's got nothing to do with an organic evolution process, because it makes no sense. It's insane. It's just they're out of control now, running around thinking everybody except the white man is oppressed on Earth, and the white men should shut up, and the white straight male is the ruiner of the universe. And I'm like, history is not 200 years old, you idiots. They seem to have this understanding of the world from 200 years old, So it's because they use colonialism and capitalism as the sort of linchpin of the agendas they had. What's so funny about them? Because most social justice warriors or PC people, they're all coming from mainly Western countries.
Yeah.
And so here's the funny thing: that they hate capitalism, and they hate Western culture.
Yeah, right.
Even though they're from it, because they see these as the two evils that all their oppression stems from. So they run around there. So obviously they think that these needs to be destroyed or replaced, and so what they do then is they now run around demanding to be accepted by the very system they claim is oppressing them. So this is what I don't get. When I grew up, when you're a punk or a metalhead or an outcast, you didn't beg for assimilation into the system because you didn't want it. Yeah. So you defined your own identity by being a punk or a metalhead or a goth or a fucking, an artist. This is where artists come from fractured groups of people who are usually outcasts, who don't quite fit in. That's where the fun people are. I don't know why they want to be accepted into the mainstream, because it's boring as fuck in there.
Yeah, right. Is the mainstream getting fatter? Is getting broader? it's getting fatter. It's also getting broader.
Oh, yeah. Well, they say it's getting broader because now they're begging to be accepted by it, because they think they're going to create this utopia where everybody's accepted and no one's ever offended again. And the funny thing is they demand that culture and society change now. Because it seems to me that if all these little young 22-year-old green hairs who are running around in their Doc Martens thinking they're nonconformists while they're begging for acceptance into a system they hate, and they've come from this download generation, and they know nothing about history, so they're just demanding that it happen now, like the way they download a CD.
Yeah,
they're going, why doesn't society just change now? How can people still be like this? How can people still be like this? People take generations and generations and thousands of years to evolve. You morons! Why should everyone just suddenly pander to the way you view the world in your little private utopia? It's ridiculous.
Well, that's the great thing about comedy. Comedy is the last bastion of free speech, and I love having, not necessarily during the show, but having a chat with comedians after the show and just being, whether it's whoever's at the table, whether they're black, white, lesbian, Asian, male, female, you can talk like we're talking openly without anyone looking left and right looking for that social justice warrior.
Here's the funny thing about these social justice warriors. They say comedy is the last bastion of free speech. Yeah, and they want to stop that as well because they have no sense of humour. They don't understand what humour's for. So they sit there going, we want everybody included in society, but you're not allowed to make jokes about these people who are minorities. Well, I'm sorry, getting jokes made about you is inclusive. That's how human beings operate. Human beings need humour and to be able to take the piss out of one another, so that we can enjoy ourselves and not just ponder on the weirdness of existence our entire life. Comedy can be done about extreme things so that we can ease our way into accepting these extreme things. They're just, but they're like, no, you can't mention anybody anymore. You can't talk about all the people who are minorities. And if you say a joke and we're offended, then we have the right to say that we're offended. Yeah, you do, but you have no right to tell me to shut up.
Yep. That's right.
And what are you talking about? You're offended. You're offended. So what?
Yeah, right.
But of course they get upset about this. Why? Because they hate Western culture. Because they've been brainwashed into hating Western culture, which free speech is one of the bedrocks of Western culture.
Yep.
And free speech means that you have to hear things that you don't agree with. And if you're an adult and if you can control your own emotions, then maybe you can sit down with someone who you wholeheartedly disagree with and have a discussion without ending in some stupid argument or wanting to punch each other in the head.
Yep. Right?
And even if it does go into that area, well, that's what you have to deal with if you want to live in a country that's free to a degree.
It's deep.
So I've grown up sort of more left in my thinking my entire life, but these people have pushed me the other way now. I'm like, nah, I don't agree with any of you.
Comedy tends to be left-leaning anyways. I mean, I don't know, there's not that many right-leaning stand-up comedians, doing their old Nazi jokes, I guess maybe in prison. Well, let's go back on to comedy. Obviously, very outspoken, got your opinions, and you make them funny as well. Where do you go about getting inspiration? Is it that anger that I can feel through the wavelengths here?
The anger is something I'm trying to work on because I realise I've got my own issues as well. Anything that's triggering me, I look at myself now, like the Buddhists have told you. Well, if you're getting triggered somehow, you better look at what's inside you, right? Because obviously something's affecting you in a way that you can't respond to. You have to react to, uncontrollably, subconsciously. You get triggered. Right? So we all get triggered, but these people now think that it's how dare they get triggered. So they seem to want to create some utopia where they're never triggered again. Well, that's ludicrous. That's shifting all responsibility onto the outside world.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, but the world is difficult for human beings to live in, and we're not that.
Yep.
We haven't perfected it, and not everything goes your way. There is unfairness, there is cruelty, there is death and violence and extremity.
And does that anger turn in? Is that how you create new jokes? You funnel that anger into a gag, into a line, into a contradiction that makes for a good laugh.
Yeah. Well, sometimes. Well, people have always said, my stuff's controversial. I don't think it's controversial at all. It's just like common sense to me in one direction. And I won't be correct in all my assumptions about things because the world is complex.
Yeah.
And so,
Back, if we bring it back to comedy a little bit, writing jokes, I've spoken to a lot of comedians. They have different techniques. Some write it down, some don't. Some try it out 3 times. If it works one of those times, it stays in the set. What do you do with your comedy?
Oh, yeah, I do that too. I've got the 3 test rule sometimes. You try something out. Yeah. Can't make it work. Sometimes
Do you write it down beforehand?
Yeah, I write lots of stuff down.
Is it verbatim?
Once I've worked out a way to say it, it's usually verbatim. If I've worked out the perfect way to say it. Sometimes, like writing a song, there's the perfect way to say something.
Yep.
You get the perfect words. You start to understand how words create pictures and colours. And you go, I seen some comedians do a joke one night. It was so perfect. And the next night, they just used different words because they obviously hadn't had it. And I thought, no, last night was better.
Yeah, right.
You had the right words there. They painted the picture better than these words.
Yeah.
Sometimes you've got to pick a word. Say you want to use a certain fruit in a joke. Sometimes you just go, what's the right one?
Is there funny fruit and non-funny fruit?
Well, it's just the way it rolls off the tongue, the way lyrics work.
Zucchini.
Sometimes, zucchini could work, depending. But it's just like lyrics, how they roll off the tongue, how they go into the next line, how the words create images and pictures. It's just the kind of thing you start to understand. That's not a good word here. You can't say that there. Say that there. Turn that around. Don't say pineapple. Say banana. It's funnier.
Yeah, right. Banana's better. It's funnier. Do you sit in a pub and write material? Do you go for a walk? Do you sit in a large lounge chair? Where do you get your inspiration?
No, I just chat. Sometimes I just get it out of the press because they say such ludicrous things.
Yeah.
You just go, there you go. I'll have that. Thank you very much.
Right.
All these PC people, like a lot of stuff off them. They're funny. And sometimes I just chat with my flatmates and come up with bits on the spot. And they go, that's funny.
Yep.
You write it down. Yeah, that'll work.
And when you write it down, where do you write it? Do you use a mobile phone? Do you have a jotter pad in the back of your pocket?
No, I use pads and pens still.
Yep.
I'm old school.
Yep.
I still go, there's something about writing it down, not just typing it. I don't mind typing it out once it's all written so you can catalogue it. But when I originally write it, I just go, no, I've got to write it.
Well, let's keep talking about comedy. You are in Melbourne. You lived in the UK for a while, actually. I believe one of your parents, is it your dad's British?
Yeah. That was handy.
Your dad's British. So you're essentially, you got a UK passport, becoming less valuable these days with Brexit. But you're down here. Are you able to talk about why you're back in Australia, not your hometown of Sydney, but down in Melbourne?
But in 2013, I was going to take a year off in 2014, so I've been on the road for 5 years. Sort of straight off the bat of coming off 10 years of the English comedy circuit. I went to like 27 countries, did a gig every single weekend for like 10 years.
Wow.
That's what me and Jim were living together. We were sort of on the UK circuit, just a decade doing every single gig we could do. And I went on the road with Reg Hunter for a few years and started doing my own headline tours in the UK and then coming back to Australia and doing it here, going back to Europe, going back to... And I just basically didn't look after myself. I was about to take a year off, and then 20 gigs from them, just had a massive crash, got adrenal fatigue, had fucking gut problems, which sent me into a suicidal depression, basic mental breakdown, complete crash of all systems with exhaustion, and just not looking after myself, taking drugs over the years, drinking over the years, never issues.
Yep.
But just, it all built up, drinking coffees, working night for 30 years, doing gigs till 1 a.m, drinking coffee in cars, driving 400 miles a day to go and do shows and getting on planes and not stopping and until my body went, that's enough of that.
Yeah.
And so that sent me into a wonderful 3-year spiraling depression.
Yeah, right.
When my girlfriend left me, I got completely depressed as hell, not just upset, depressed, psych drugs and all this kind of stuff, and getting off psych drugs and getting, just a world of absolute chaos. Depression's fucking serious shit. And so, dealt with that. Then I was in a car accident in the middle of that, and all my karma came at once. It was fucking insane. It was really intense. I don't know how I'm alive, too.
Yeah, right. Was it a serious car accident, was it?
Serious.
Was it?
No, the depression.
Oh, the depression.
The car accident was pretty serious. Gave me some injuries I've got to try and remedy now, which I'm sort of doing now the depression's gone. Mm-hmm. And, if you've never had depression, you can't describe it to anyone.
Yeah.
It's brutal. It's brutal. Brutal beyond compare.
Yep.
And, went through 3 years of that chaos and Yeah, so I wrote a show about it, Nervous Breakthrough, and I've just finished that. It's coming out on DVD, but I've got a documentary which a fellow was on the road. My last tour in the UK in 2013. A friend of mine came out and filmed us for about 3 or 4 days and filmed a couple of shows, and we're going to make a small documentary and release that show along with the documentary. Mm-hmm. And I ended up having a fucking breakdown, and so now the good thing is he's moved to Australia. He lives in Perth, so now the doco's kind of we're finishing it up now, or we're doing a second edit. Yep. And seeing if we can get it sort of, it's turned into more a documentary about eventually having a breakdown. So
yeah, right.
It's going to be an interesting little thing if we can get it right. And so yeah, I've really got no qualms about talking. They always go, there's so much stigma around mental health and all this. And maybe there is, maybe there isn't. I don't know. But I got it.
Well, certainly Australia is doing its best to, there's a lot of mental health. Beyond Blue, Julia Gillard has now taken up the helm of Beyond Blue.
Well, people, a lot of these systems they set up, they do their best and they help some people, which is good. But it's a very difficult illness to really help anyone with, really. Sometimes, because they're flipping coins and crossing their fingers when you give them these drugs. I'm not on any of these drugs anymore, thank God. And I feel that they're an absolute. Some people who take them and they help them. And good luck to you. Mm-hmm. Good luck to you, because I know what depression's like. So if it's helping you get out of that hellhole, and good luck to you. I'm grateful for your sanity back. But there's also, it's a major business which I don't trust, and they're handing out antidepressants to left, right, and centre to kids, and they're giving them to kids, and they're giving them psych drugs, and you try and get off these psych drugs. The doctors don't know anything about them. Oh no, you just take half for 2 weeks and you'll be off. Bullshit. Yeah. Bullshit. I've come down off cocaine, acid, booze, pot, drugs, pills. What's that last? A day? You had a horrible Monday, go for a sauna on Tuesday, you sort it out. You try and come off psych drugs. Mate, I ended up in rehab trying to get off psych drugs.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, they're devastating. They're devastating. Finally, I got off them. I'm fucking off them. I've only been better for about 2 months.
Yep.
Amazing. It just sort of went.
Yeah, right.
And I stopped these. I had one last psych drug I was on. I just stopped it cold turkey, and nothing happened for the first time. And I was like, thank God I'm off that shit. So yeah, it's a strange world. That world, and I don't trust these multinational drug companies handing out stuff to kids. I don't trust it at all. And I feel sorry for anyone who's just wandered in there. Because they handed them out to people now who just wander in. They go, I'm a little stressed at uni. Here, take these antidepressants. No. No, don't. Don't listen to these people. I had an actual mental breakdown and I was refusing to take them. Don't take them if you're just upset. Don't. They don't know what they're doing to your brain. They rewire your brain. They fuck you. You won't be able to get off them. Don't take them if you're not super ill. Just don't. Do something else. Go swimming. Go for a run. Buy a bike. Do something.
Yeah.
Eat mangoes. I don't know. Do something. Change your diet. Exercise more. Do something. Do something. But try and stay away from these things. Jesus Christ.
Well, very deep conversation, and
I know, my interviews always end up like this.
Yeah, they do. Okay. I should have done more research. Well, I don't know. My Wednesday doesn't feel so bright anymore.
Well, here's the funny thing: is people used to say, "Oh, don't tell me all this stuff, Steve. It depresses me." Well, don't let it depress you. Just look at it critically. Yeah. This is where we are. This is what's happening. What can I do about it, or not do about it? But not knowing about it's not going to help.
That's right. And you are a positive person, ultimately. You see the lighter side of everything. Yeah. Well, and that's inspiring.
Maybe it's because I grew up around extreme heavy metal that the things that are full on don't spin me out.
Yeah.
I've often thought that. Wondered, I'll just go and talk about. People go, how do you talk about this on stage? Don't you scare what the audience thinks? I've never been scared what the audience thinks, just because. Well, one, because I moved to England where they're better at understanding this stuff.
Yep.
Because they understand comedy on just multi-dimensional levels, really. They understand all comedy and they're great at it. They're amazing at it. And secondly, it's just like, I just don't, you're all adults, aren't you? You're all upset. There's no children in this comedy gig.
No.
Surely you can hear something that makes you sort of, it doesn't matter if it's a little uncomfortable, just deal with it. The world's uncomfortable. We know it's uncomfortable. That's why we all run around getting addicted to things. We don't want to deal with it.
Yeah. Fantastic. So you're based in Melbourne here. I believe you're going on a bit of a tour. You're going to New Zealand?
Yeah.
Comedy?
I'm going there just to do just 2 shows with a friend of mine, Brendan Lobgrove, who's a New Zealand comic. He's just put on a couple of gigs, and I thought, I want it now. I'm not feeling as bad depression-wise, and I'll just pop over there, do a couple of shows for him, just to, get back on stage. And
perfect.
I'm going to Tasmania in August, I think. I've done one gig down there in the 90s, but haven't done it there for decades. So,
do you know Chris Franklin?
Yeah, I know since the very beginning, and me and him and Tahir used to go on tours together back in the 90s.
Right. Well, he lives there. He lives in Tasmania now, so
yeah,
catch
he
up with him.
lives down there. So I've had some full-on times with Chris Franklin in the day.
I imagine. I've heard some stories.
I can't believe he's still alive. He's still drinking VBs and eating fucking sausage rolls for breakfast.
He is, and smoking.
He's an anomaly, that guy.
He is. I don't know. It's the Franklin genes. There's Bob Franklin and him. I don't know. There's Hughes and Franklin families. I think they're just good for long-term survival in extreme conditions.
I'm like a North Face jacket.
Yeah, you are. Well, Steve, mate, I never thought that this conversation was going to go so deep. Thank you for opening up and sharing some of your innermost secrets, even though they become material on stage and everyone gets to see them in the end.
Yeah. Well, no problem. I hope your listeners enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, they definitely will, and I think mental health anyway is an issue, and stand-up comedy. Well, you wouldn't be the first stand-up comedian to face depression, would you?
No. That's the big thing about comedy. I remember John Cleese once said when he started getting therapy, he goes, "I'm scared I won't be funny if I get therapy." I was like, "Yeah, I think like that too." You romanticize the tortured artist part of you,
You're the Van Gogh. You've still got both ears.
Yeah. I've still got both ears.
Well, cheers, mate. Steve, thank you very much for your time this morning. And, I look forward to catching up with you in person, seeing you at one of your shows, maybe here in Melbourne, if we can get you up on stage again. Cheers again, Steve. Have a great day.
No worries. You too, brother.